Hey everybody, this is the lesson recording for the self-regulation lesson that comes after our self-observation lesson. So last week we were scheduled to meet I think the day after, the day of, I can't remember now, the tornado. So I understand some of you couldn't make it because of that, so I'm hoping to fill in some of the blanks that may be there for you if you missed last week's in-person lesson. So we're going to kind of cover self-observation and self-regulation side by side today. So I've uploaded the PowerPoint slides. You can follow along. One thing we covered in our face-to-face meeting was this idea of reactivity. So this is a communications class, an interactions class. So it's very important for us to know what happens on the kind of micro level of in our minds, with our thoughts and our emotions, and also in our bodies while we're in interactions with others, so that we can appropriately manage ourselves, soothe ourselves when necessary, and appropriately respond to whatever it is that we notice come up for us. Okay, so it's undoubtable that most of you, all of you, have been in situations where you felt emotionally reactive, which basically means that the phrases like "I lost my head," or "I blew my top," or "I was overwhelmed," "I felt flooded," emotionally, those states are states of reactivity. We are kind of knocked offline from our normal way of thinking and feeling clearly and logically and carefully. And that's a commonplace one that we find ourselves as human beings, but it can be a fairly dangerous place to be in interaction with others in a professional setting. If we're the professional, that reactivity should not gain a lot of control over us if we can help it. So reactivity technically could be thought of as kind of like a falling out of what's called the social engagement system. The social engagement system is a specific set of circuits in our nervous system. So this isn't just like a poetic description of what it's like when we get along well with people. It's actually a physiologically measurable state of the body. When, and I won't go into too much detail about it, but the essence of it is that our bodies and our brains are behaving in such a way that lead us to feel safe and connected to our environment around us and to the people in that environment. When we're there, we can deal with stress, we can deal with challenge, we can deal with difficulty without losing ourselves to it, without becoming overwhelmed by it. And so this is a really great place to try to hang out the most that you can. Now, when we do fall out of that social engagement system and into a state of reactivity, you all know what this feels like, I'm certain. But what actually happens is that our bodies change to such an extent that we actually begin to perceive ourselves and the world around us in a different way. So it's a kind of literal statement that when we lose ourselves to reactivity, we actually see, hear, and feel a different world than we normally do. Emotions implicitly filter our sight, filter our hearing, and filter our experience of our own body, and filter our thoughts in such a way that kind of tints everything with that reactivity. It's like if you put on a certain colored glasses, like a blue tinted glasses, everything looks blue around you. That's very technically what happens in our nervous system when we enter this reactive state. So we don't really know what's happening all the time. So part of what we're talking about with self-observation is simply acknowledging when that might happen so that we can do something about it. We're driven especially in states of reactivity, by typically unacknowledged and context-dependent mental models. That means a mental model is like a state of mind set with its own pre-programmed responses and reactions, its own pre-programmed patterns of thinking, and it's kind of like when the switch is flipped for that mental mode or mental model, we kind of turn into little thinking, feeling, breathing robots. We just sort of play out the same scripts with that the mental model has been trained to lead us toward. So I don't know if that sounds kind of abstract to some of you, but you know what it feels like to kind of behave the same way when you go home to your family of origin versus how you behave very automatically when you meet up with comfortable friends or other family members, right? So like you're around different people, you kind of automatically go into a different mode of how you talk, how you think, how you feel, things like that. Those are examples of how mental models kind of shift given our situations. So it's good to be aware of those things. That's where self-observation kind of comes in. I think it's useful to remember this is some sort of ancient adage, I think, but thoughts become words, words become actions, actions become habits, and habits becomes destiny. So what that kind of points to is the tracking back gradually and gradually toward the very small moments of your experience where thoughts are kind of fed in one way or another, and they lead to different outcomes in the bigger picture. So I'll try to be quick review of self-observation. I say I'll try to be because this is a bigger discussion, and hopefully you'll get what you need from this little introduction and other resources I provide you. But as always, reach out to me. I'll be glad to, have a phone call with you or meet with you even or something if some of this is unclear, because it might be pretty unfamiliar. When we talk about self-observation, in my estimation, the very best tool for self-observation is mindfulness practice. Mindfulness practice is specifically intended and designed to increase your ability to become aware of what you are and what you're made of, right? What thoughts and emotions occur when, how sights and sounds and physical sensations impact you, and how they lead you to feel driven in one way or another. Okay, so it's just the perfect tool for self-observation. And there are many ways to talk about and to practice what people call mindfulness, and that's a pretty squishy term because there's lots of different definitions for it. The one that I'm going to suggest and guide us through for the purposes of increasing self-observation, again, aiming toward skillful communication habits, is actually called the Unified Mindfulness System of teaching mindfulness skills. And in that system, the word mindfulness is really specifically defined, and it is defined as a way of paying attention to what happens around you and what happens within you, that's your thoughts and emotions, that involves 3 attentional skills, that is, skills of your attention. And the first is concentration, the ability to pay attention to what you find relevant at any given moment. Sensory clarity, which is the ability to track in real time the details or subtleties of your experience as it unfolds. And the last one is equanimity, which I'll spend a minute talking about here now. Roughly speaking, equanimity means letting things come and go without push and pull. It's kind of an oversimplified way of putting it. This is the attitude that we take while observing ourselves, while observing our thoughts and our emotions and our sensations and our sights and sounds that we notice around us. It is a way of being open with what you notice, a non-judging of what you notice, a kind of non-reactivity, a non-resistance, a non-judgmental stance, a very accepting stance. And these are things, all words kind of pointing to this thing, but the taste of equanimity is when you notice something really pleasant happening, right? Thoughts you are enjoying, emotions that feel good, circumstances that are pleasant, and you're not ruining it by wishing it weren't going to go away, right? By trying to hold on to the experience that feels good unnecessarily. Okay, that's an example of having equanimity, of not holding on to it, kind of letting things come and go. It's equally true that when we have unpleasant things occur, really negative thoughts, negative emotions, unpleasant or even painful circumstances, when we don't fight with what we notice, doesn't mean we don't try to change things for the better. It just means while we're experiencing physical or emotional discomfort, we allow ourselves to feel it, maybe even feel it fully. Doing so prevents us from fighting with the fact that it's happening. Okay? And that non-fighting, non-clinging to attitude is what we're talking about with equanimity. These three skills of mindfulness are the perfect starting points for adaptive self-regulation. Self-regulation means we are actually doing something to improve our response or our circumstances. Okay? So it's useful to know where to begin. And self-observation is definitely the place to start with self-regulation. There's a guided mindfulness practice called See, Hear, Feel that I've shared with you. It's actually the video that goes along with a course that I've taught about unified mindfulness. It's a system I'm certified to teach or coach in, not teach specifically, but be a mindfulness coach with. And roughly describing See, Hear, Feel refers to any and all things that we can experience around us or within us. We see external sights. We also see in our imagination, mental images. We see, hear sounds around us. We also hear our mental talk. Okay, so we think by seeing our thoughts or hearing our thoughts. That's see or hear. And we feel physical sensations in the body. That can include taste and smell too for this model. And we feel more emotionally charged sensations in the body. And those three categories, externally and internally, basically cover everything that you ever experience and that you ever will. So it's a really nice, summed up model of how you can pay attention and practice mindfulness. An actual method of that practice, See, Hear, Feel, I've described briefly in the video that accompanies that practice. So I'll ask you to try that on a kind of a routine basis. Aim for more days than not, if not every day, for the next at least few weeks, and I'll be asking you to do more intensive practice with that in a couple of weeks to come. So let's turn to self-regulation. These are a little more straightforward in method. So there are basically two approaches. Again, self-regulation meaning, all right, I've noticed that I'm really reactive right now. What do I do about it to kind of de-escalate, to calm myself? So one method is to change the body, do something to impact the body so that your mind kind of follows along, right? And the second method is the opposite. Changing your mind, that's guiding your thoughts in strategic ways so that your body follows along, okay? So you're either changing your body to change your mind, or you're changing your mind to change your body. So let's talk about what that can look like. In changing the body to change the mind, these are just a few little techniques you can try. Others that you do on your own, I want to hear about them, and you keep trying them. One direct way to change the body to change the mind is by taking care of the body. You can remember the acronym SEEDS to remind yourself to seek out social engagement, to get exercise, to the second E stands for education, which kind of refers to pouring yourself into things you enjoy learning about, kind of like passions or interests or hobbies. So you're continuing to educate yourself, not necessarily in class or school, just in any way. The D refers to diet and nutrition, so pay attention to what you put in your body. And the last S is to regulate your sleep. Try to get the appropriate amount of high quality sleep. Okay? So social, exercise, educate, diet, and sleep. Those are things you can just point to right away. All right, how's my sleep? What am I eating? Have I hung out with friends I enjoy spending time with this week? Those are behavioral changes you can do most of the time fairly easily to directly impact your body so that your mind can be regulated or soothed too. Secondly, intentional relaxation. That means I'm going to place my attention on the back of my neck. I have some tension there right now, maybe because I'm kind of staring down for a while. So I'm going to decide to, for just a few moments, intentionally loosen and relax or soften the muscles around my neck, maybe my shoulders. And you can do this as I'm doing it. Maybe kind of soften my belly and let my breath move more smoothly. Drop any tension in my forehead, my hands, my feet, my arms, my legs. You get the picture. Just kind of walking down the body or checking into different muscle groups and intentionally loosening relaxation. Okay, I'm not going to talk about the vagus nerve a lot, even though it's really, really interesting. But the basic thing I want you to take away is that the vagus nerve, is highly involved in that social engagement system I mentioned. And 80% of the neural fibers in the vagal nerve are what are called afferent. That means that they move messages or information from the body to the brain. Okay? So what that means is if we do things, little techniques that I'm going to talk about in a second, that stimulate the vagal nerve, then the body literally tells the mind everything's okay, right? It's almost like the body tricks the mind into moving toward that social engagement system more easily. So here's some ways to activate the vagal nerve, a specific branch of it that's important to serve this purpose. Deep breathing. That means, as it sounds, you lengthen your breath and you also slow the breath down. So you breathe deeply in, fully and slowly, and breathe deeply out, fully and slowly. Do that a number of times, maybe 5 times. Careful not to get overly lightheaded. 2 really specific ways to do that are to count the duration of your breath. 5 seconds in, right? I'm breathing in. 5 seconds out, breathing out. That 5 in, 5 out is a good way to just breathe all the time. You won't get lightheaded with it, more than likely. It actually regulates your heart rate variability to a very healthy level on average. That means your heart begins to beat in a pattern that's generally healthy for your body and healthy for your stress level. And you can do it all the time. Just kind of always in the background. Lengthen your breath 5 seconds in, 5 seconds out. You train yourself to do that. Another way is breathe 5 seconds in and 10 seconds out. That typically kicks in the parasympathetic nervous system, makes your body kind of slow down a little bit. You can't really do that all the time, but if you're having trouble sleeping, for instance, or really nervous, try that 5 times, 6 times. Real quick, I'm going to try to get through these somewhat fast. Another way to activate the vagal nerve is between the nose and about the hairline, splashing cold water or holding something frozen on your face there. It can be a little uncomfortable at first, but don't kill yourself doing it. But doing that directly activates the vagal nerve. So that's one way to kind of soothe the nervous system. Hum breathing is tying in with deep breathing, but actually activating the vocal cords. Something as simple. Okay, it's kind of strange to do. May not do it, if you're riding the bus or something like that. People might think you're a little strange. But activating the vocal cords actually activates the vagal nerve to get the social engagement system online, which makes sense. We are socially engaged through our voice, activating that in a kind of neutral or calm way, not with a highly tense voice. Sort of tricks your body and your brain into thinking, okay, I'm speaking in this easy way. My vocal cords are activated in this easy way. That must mean everything's okay. Intentional movement or awareness of movement just means to bring your attention to your body and do your best to only move intentionally and to be very aware of the sensations of movement. Okay, we get caught up in a lot of compulsive movement, wringing our hands. I think I do that a little bit sometimes, just when I'm thinking hard, or like bouncing your foot up and down or something like that. All that nervous movement, it's not necessarily bad. It's just that it can keep your body agitated, and you can do so. You can place your attention there and kind of decide to only move intentionally. Okay, I want to try to wrap up so that this isn't a forever video, but changing the mind to change the body. Here are a few methods to do this, and I'm reminding you that I'm going to be asking you to try some of these. Teach yourself emotional language so that you know specifically how to describe your emotional state. It's using words to very clearly delineate what you feel. Okay? Don't just say, I feel bad, I feel good, I feel happy, I feel sad. Get into some nitty-gritty details about what flavor of sad am I? Right? Am I forlorn? Am I sorrowful? Am I grieving? Am I lonely? Things like that. Those are really specific pinpoint words, and they're very helpful to actually soothe the brain, so to speak, in doing that. Real or simulated safe social connection. That means go meet people that you enjoy. I say safe because you have to make sure that you're in a good place with a crowd that you find fulfilling to be around. Simulated is an interesting one. Do make sure you maintain person-to-person contact. Simulated contact alone doesn't do the trick, but in a pressing situation or circumstance, you can bring to mind people you feel safely connected to. Remember spending time with them in the past. Imagine spending time with them in the future. Like, try to really imagine what it feels like to be safely connected to those people. That's actually a helpful thing to do. So a few other things. See good. This is kind of like unified mindfulness terminology for bringing positive visualization to mind. Using your imagination to imagine yourself succeeding in some way. Imagine yourself in a pleasant place. That's kind of like the safe place imagery. I'm on the beach, my toes are in the sand, I'm on vacation, whatever. Those aren't fix-alls, but they can be helpful. They'll nudge you your thoughts in the right direction, in a positive direction. Hear good is similar. You're bringing to mind positive words or affirmations, using meaningful words or phrases. And cognitive reappraisal means kind of catching yourself in what's called, what people call stinking thinking, really negative thoughts, and reframe those thoughts, so that you glean from them a different kind of meaning, or replace them if they're not accurate. So you kind of have to test them out. Okay, I keep thinking I'm, terrible at my job, for instance. I keep having that thought because I'm making these mistakes. But you kind of catch that thought and then examine it. Am I really terrible at my job? Or is this thing just kind of happening that I don't like and I want to improve in? Looking for evidence with those things can be really helpful to sort of break the habit of negative thinking. A word about the term practice. I'm suggesting that you take on the few ways I've presented as practices of self-observation and self-regulation. I'm calling them practices because the more you do something, the more likely it will happen again. That is why practice works. And it's also the case that you're never not practicing something. So as you're sitting there, either very engaged with what it is that we're talking about here, or playing a video game while your schoolwork's on or whatever, you're actually practicing the way that you place your attention in doing what you're doing. Okay, so at every moment we're practicing something. You're developing habits. It's another way to think about it. So be careful what you practice. Okay, think intentionally of whatever thoughts you have. Try to make them intentional. Act, speak intentionally. It means whatever you do, whatever you say, do your very best. You can't do it all the time. Do your very best to be intentional about it and accurate. That doesn't mean that you reserve all thought, all speech, and all action until you know exactly what you're thinking, saying, or doing, because you'd basically be frozen. But doing your best to examine your own thoughts, words, and actions as you go about your day, so that you bring as much intention to them as possible, because you're practicing at every moment what will make it more likely for you to think, say, or do in the future. Okay, so I hope this cram session tried to kind of cram these two lessons into one to clarify some things from last week. Hope this was helpful. And I have several assignments on Blackboard for this week and next week. So you'll see the assignments folder is labeled for 2 weeks at one time. So you have a little more time to complete them all. And the communication line's open. So give me a call, send me a text, send me an email if there's any points of confusion for any of this stuff we're covering here.